One of the things that shocked me was that we were able to write off our driveway. I would have never thought to do that without a tax professional.
Hello and welcome to The Edit. We are going to talk today about tax write-offs, which sounds a little boring, but can be exciting when you realize what all you can write off. At the very beginning of this podcast, I need to let you all know that I am not a tax expert. None of us here are tax experts. We are going to talk about what we know. We are going to talk about what we know as photographers, what we've done in our business, give you some ideas of what to look for, some ideas of how to maybe track your expenses so that you can write it off. However, we could be wrong. Taxes change. Things change every year. And we're specifically going to be talking about federal income taxes because things are going to be different state to state. When I lived in Tennessee, where they do not have an income tax, you did not have to worry about your state tax write-offs. I'm in Minnesota now, and we do have state taxes for our income, and we can write off stuff. If you have questions, we probably will not be able to answer them specifically. We don't want to act like we're tax professionals. We don't want to mess anything up for you, but we're going to have some resources for you to look at. Of course, the IRS website is the best place to find your answers. That's the official answer. TurboTax actually has a lot of great articles that will answer a lot of these questions, and we'll talk more about TurboTax coming up. We'll talk about hiring a tax professional. If you can hire a tax professional, that is the absolute best way to go, but it just is going to depend on how much money you're making if you're going to need to do it. And I wanted to start with this story. In our business, my husband and I ran our wedding photography business, and he did all the taxes. He used to do all our business taxes. And when our company became bigger, when we had associates, we decided, okay, we need to have a tax professional take a look at this. And I asked him last night, I said, remind me what she said to you. And she said, Peter, you know just enough to be dangerous. So what that means is that he knew a lot, but also he's not a tax professional.
Yep.
So if things changed, he could have missed something. He could have missed something that could have got us in trouble with the IRS, or he could have missed something where we ended up having to pay more money than we had to. So when you have a tax professional helping you out, you can just have like a peace of mind with everything.
Yeah.
If you're not big enough to do that, TurboTax is a great way to do this. You can do TurboTax Plus. That's how we filed our taxes this year. We have for the last several years. We don't need a tax professional for my business at this current point because we don't have associates. So definitely look into getting some help. Take our advice and what we're telling you, and don't do anything without double checking everything.
Yep.
But what you can do, and what we know that you can do right now as a business owner, is track everything you spend. So that's something we can tell you for sure. Any cost that you have for your business, you want to keep your receipts. You want to write it down. You want to track it. It's such a good habit to get into. We've talked about in another episode how it's important for you to have a personal bank account and a business bank account. Have a personal credit card. You can have a business credit card, but you want to keep all of those expenses separate. It can be really important, especially when you're filing your taxes. And we just want to make sure you're taking note of everything. You're doing things properly. It may seem like as you're starting your business, it's easier just to kind of wing it. These are the things that can be more tedious, but also in the long run, if you start keeping track of everything at the beginning, you'll be so thankful at the end of the year when you need to file.
Yes.
And we're coming up on the end of the year.
Yep.
So I first want to ask Amanda and Aaron, we'll start with you, Amanda. What was something that you were surprised to learn when you started your business around tax write-offs?
Yeah. So for me, everybody was like, "Oh, great, you started a business. You can write all this stuff off. Do you buy a computer? You write it off. Hey, you just
Mhm.
went to go you went to go work at a coffee shop. Awesome, write that off." And it gave me this sense of, "Oh, the whole dollar amount that I am spending, all of that can be written off. Great, let's do this." And then come to find out, no, it's not like, oh, cool, I spent $1,000 on, my phone that I need for my business, and I get $1,000 back on taxes. Definitely does not work that way. But I feel like the people I talked to led me to believe I should just, keep buying more because then I can write it off and I'll get it back in taxes. But it
Mhm.
doesn't really work out that way. There's a percentage of each one, and then there's depreciating assets, which is a whole other thing. Yeah, so
Mhm.
I definitely remember feeling very, led astray when people talked about, "Just write it off, just buy it, it's fine, you'll just be able to write it off." I'm like, "I don't have
Yeah.
the money to actually afford to do that," and so, yeah, having to learn what really that meant when you could write something off. For me, that was the biggest.
Yeah.
I traveled once to take senior portraits of a cousin, and there was not a close enough cousin for me to do it for free, right, y'all? So there was time to take payment, and there was like a joke that was made where she was like, "But you get to count your trip off now, right? Because you did this. So really, we did you a favor." That's not how this works.
Yeah.
Like, I had to
No.
take a 10-day Michigan trip, do one photo. Oh, I just said where it was from. So now if this cousin doesn't listen to our podcast, so it's fine. Um, but it's not, I mean, so many people have misconceptions about what a write-off actually means
Mhm.
and percentages. I still, after 15 years in business, don't have my head fully wrapped around different things like depreciation and what things qualify as. And I know it's hard in the beginning to spend money on services that you can quote unquote do yourself,
Mhm.
but because you can do it yourself doesn't mean that you'll do it correctly
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
as well as you could. One of the things that shocked me was that we were able to write off our driveway, and I'll tell you why in a second, but I would have never thought to do that without a tax professional, and it ended up saving me so much more money than I actually paid her that year or each year.
Yeah.
Um, so the reason our studio is in the backyard down a hill. In order to get to it, you had to come up our driveway, which is like a quarter mile, and it was gravel, and not all the cars could make it up the hill. Like it was a rough driveway. And our tax preparer said, when you pave that driveway, you get to count a portion of it off, right? Like it's a business expense for you to get the cars from point A to point B. They can't get there without that road, right? And I said, right. And so don't ask me what percentage or how all of that worked out because it's been a few years, but I would have never even known that that was a possibility. And depreciating different things versus counting it 100%
Yep.
as far as your gear and stuff, bring in the professional for that for
Mhm.
sure.
Yes, absolutely. And, I spent some time before doing this episode looking at so I could understand everything, so I could explain it to you all a little better. And one of the things that I did not realize, one of the things that you can write off is your mileage.
Yep.
Mm.
So when you're driving to a session, when you're driving back, you can write off what you spend on gas. And so that's definitely something you want to keep track of. The other thing I didn't realize is that you can actually write off your car
Yep.
and your upkeep of your car. So again, you have to figure out there's a way you can figure out what is the percentage, like what percentage of your time is spent on business when using your car.
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't have to be like, oh, this is only my company car.
Mhm.
It can be your personal car. But when you're tracking your mileage too, you'll be able to look, okay, this year I've driven I don't even know how much most people drive in a year, 50,000 miles,
A lot.
and 25,000 miles of that I have documented that this was for work stuff. So then you can write off 50% of your, you get your tires changed, you get your oil changed, you have to pay a mechanic to fix a problem, and you'll be able to write that off. So,
And
go ahead.
I was just going to talk about how we write off mileage. I don't know if that was in your plans, but I thought now.
I actually, because you have a good way to do that, don't you?
So like 2011 Aaron, 2013 Aaron still might have been, I had a paper ledger that I bought at Office Max or Office Depot or somewhere. And every time I would get in the car, I'd write for a session, for something work related. I'd write my starting mileage, my ending mileage, and where I was going. And then I would calculate that up, which was a nightmare. And then someone told me, so the two that come to mind, one of them I use and one of them I have not. The one that I use is just QuickBooks. So my QuickBooks Self-Employed is the one that I have because there's so many different tiers. So I use QuickBooks Self-Employed. This is not a sponsored podcast, though I wish it was. And they, so that's how I keep track of all of my expenses. But they also, in the app, have a mileage tracker that I have running at all times. And then I just have to go in periodically and you swipe whether it's a business trip or a personal trip. If it's a business trip, you can do the note, but it shows you this was your starting address, this was your ending, like where were you going? And you just do it that way. And I had said this before, the last time we talked about QuickBooks on an episode, the mileage deduction that I get from using that app far covers what I pay for the monthly fee for the app. So it's totally worth it to me. Like I get so much more money back in a mileage deduction because it's always running. I just have to remember to go in there and categorize them. So that's included with my QuickBooks subscription, but there are other apps, Mileage IQ. I've heard people talk about a lot. Never looked into it, but I just know that there are other third party, there are other apps where that's just what they do is they track your mileage for you. And then you've just got the numbers at the end to be able to submit to your tax preparer.
Yeah, that's great. And, I have QuickBooks and I have not been using that and I need to. Thank you for the reminder.
Just in case this doesn't come up in the conversation, the other thing, because it's very applicable to what we're talking about, is with the QuickBooks app, when I have a receipt from anywhere, whether it's Hobby Lobby for a prop or, coffee with a client or whatnot, I can pull up my QuickBooks apps, take a photo of the receipt, and it will include it so that then I'm not keeping up with my paper receipts anymore. Sean McClellan told me about that, a mutual friend, Whitney, by the way. Told you how long it's been since I learned that trick. But and so again, I think I'm paying like 11 or 16 bucks a month for it, but it just makes things easier. And I think if it wasn't doing it for me, I just wouldn't be doing it. I gotta be honest. So it's my little unsponsored plug for QuickBooks.
I love QuickBooks, and I think actually TurboTax is now connected with QuickBooks.
Yeah.
So for our past taxes this past year, I don't think our TurboTax and QuickBooks was connected yet, but we're going to make sure they are this year. Unless, by chance I need a professional this year because I'm banking it all of a sudden for my business.
Yep.
I'm listening, by the way. This is a first for the podcast. I'm going to look something up that I just thought of while we're talking. I'm not texting while we're podcasting.
Yeah. I love it.
I just had a thought. And so we're going to see if I can circle back around to this.
Okay.
Yeah. I would love to hear it. And one thing that Erin touched on that I wanted to talk about is she talked about, she went to have coffee with a client. So when you do business meetings, you can write off stuff like that, like you're having coffee, having a meal with a client. If you're paying for the client, you can write that off. This is something I'm not sure of. I think I was reading you can only take off 50% of your meal. And you want to make sure there's some terminology that they use around this. But when you're doing this, when you're doing a business expense, you're going to take your client out, you need to make sure it is ordinary and necessary.
Yeah.
That is the tax term. So that means you can't be like, hey, I want to meet my client on a yacht and we're going to go on a boat ride and buy a $2,000 bottle of wine and we'll write it off. That is not ordinary. That is not necessary.
Yeah.
You can't write it off. So a lot of these terms are vague. So who decides what's ordinary and necessary? And even reading that, I'm like, okay, so if you're like wining and dining a celebrity, you're a like scouting agent or something, something like that. I don't feel like you would want to go to some McDonald's.
Exactly. You would want to charter that yacht and get yourself a like amazing sushi chef there on board to create omakase meals. Like,
yeah. And along with that, when we talk, so Amanda has a home office, Erin has her studio. I have a home office. Whether you can write it off or not is really dependent on how you use it. So, for example, I don't write off my home office, and partly because I use it for other things. I have I do artwork as part of my business, but my son has a desk in here. He'll come and create. Sometimes I'll just hang out here if I want to be by myself and watch TV. Because I'm doing that, I can't write it off. You have to, the terminology again is exclusive and regular use. So if you have an office, it needs to be for business exclusively, and you need to use it regularly. So you could do it in part of a room. Like you could actually, and then you could like measure it to figure out the percentage of your home. So then you would figure out what percentage of your house is being used as an office, but you can't like let your kids do homework on that desk, or it's not going to be exclusive. So that's something that you want to make sure that you're doing. Now, somebody's not like, a tax officer isn't going to come into your house and look at this, but they'll want to see proof that it is exclusive. And my view is you don't want to mess with taxes.
Yeah.
So what could happen? Like, how could you get in trouble? You're going to, if someone comes and they audits you and they find out you've messed up something, they're going to not only charge you the tax that you would owe based on, wait, you actually didn't get to write this off, so you actually owe us this much. And then they're going to charge, I think it's like 20% on top of that. So you're going to end up paying 120% of what you would have owed beforehand. So it's really important to try your best to keep it correct. And again, this is just us sitting here talking about it. There is so much that goes into this. There's so much that can change over a year. You really have to find like official people to tell you the truth so you're not messing stuff up.
Yeah.
Now, Erin, did you find what you were looking for?
My thought was, what if some of these CRMs for photographers also track mileage? Honeybook, 17 Hats, Dipsado, all of those. My quick Google search, I don't think that any of them do. Maybe in the future. I think that would be an excellent add-on. I don't know the logistics of location in those apps and stuff like that, but I think that would be somebody should do that. Somebody should have a photographer CRM that also tracks your mileage.
Is there anything else with you two that you maybe didn't understand at first that you understand more now?
I feel like really the biggest thing I've learned is keep track of all the things.
Yeah.
And the more that you do now as expenses come, the less headache it is when you actually have to submit all of these numbers and all of the information. I think it might have even been last year, maybe the year before that, I kept track of all my mileage. However, I didn't actually input it into my Excel sheet. And so I had like, I think I did it for like the first couple of months, but then I had like 10 months worth of inputs that I had to put in. And it was, deadline was coming up, and it's so stressful to have to do all of that at once, to do 10 months worth of work all at the same time. Had I just done it every month like I usually did, for whatever reason, life got the best of me, and I was like, oh, I'll just do it next month. Oh, I'll do it next month. I just kept pushing it off. And then it was just this huge nightmare, and it took so long and just stressful, especially because, you're coming towards the deadline and you need to get it done. So if you can keep up with it in real time as you do it, it's going to save future you from hating past you.
I gotta be honest, I do really well until busy season hits for me in the fall. And then I spend basically all of January trying to catch up on taxes from that last portion of the year. And it's okay too. If I've got the time to do it then, like if I'm just flying by the seat of my pants right now, but yeah, it's so much easier. It is a nightmare come January when I haven't categorized any of this mileage. And so I put on a Netflix show and I just sit there.
Go.
It's so much easier if you can keep up with it. But at least if something is running, I mean, all of my bank accounts are set up, my credit card, like when things are coming out, QuickBooks is pretty smart these days to auto categorize it. And then I can just double check. At least that's something that's running in the background. But yeah, you gotta have something going. You don't want to try to sit down, late March and
try to figure out going.
What did I spend all my money on? Yeah.
And I'm going to, so I shared with you that Peter did all of our taxes and that I hate taxes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be very vulnerable and honest here. The last few years I've been doing them myself. Every time it comes April, I'm like, they're not ready. They're not done. So you can file an extension. It can cost more. And so like even this year, it was like everything was, I had just ignored stuff. I was busy. I had income coming in and different, like, as I have a lot of different ways that my income comes in now. And we filed an extension. Peter went ahead. We made a guess at what my taxes would be so we could go ahead and pay it and not have to pay any interest. And so then I think it was just like a couple of weeks ago where the next deadline was coming.
I remember you talking about it.
Ready. And I sat down and I actually got it done very quickly, but it's like my brain puts it off so much.
We're creatives. We're not numbers people. I mean, maybe Miss valedictorian over here, Amanda. But
I know. I actually really like the number side of things. I have my Excel sheet, and I really love every month making sure that like everything looks good, and I double check to make sure all my credit card receipts are matching up, and that I put everything in. I don't know. I like that part.
I'm so jealous. I really am jealous. Like and let me know. And if anyone is out there listening and you're like, hey, I get you, Whitney, please tell me.
I know you're not the only one. That's the thing. I feel like I'm the outlier where for some reason I've always liked numbers. So I like having all that up-to-date number information. If anything, it's kind of like a nice brain break for me in that sense. I feel like, especially during, like Erin's talking about busy season right now, my brain is mush. I like have so much stuff that needs to get done. There's so much just, I don't know, things and life on top of that too. So sitting down with my spreadsheet, I'm like, you know what, this makes sense. There's a right answer. And I feel like that's kind of a nice change. Like there's no right answer. Did I get the right number of pictures culled down? Is my client going to have a hard time deciding between these couple of images? How am I going to get these ordered in time to not have to pay the, expedited shipping fee when my client's being late to order? Like, no, I can sit down. My numbers are there. And it's just like a brain break for me. So
that's awesome. And it's really interesting because I'm actually the treasurer of our HOA where I live. But there is something about other people's numbers that I don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
It is my numbers.
That's fair. Yeah. I can see that.
I like cleaning other people's houses more than I like cleaning my own. Like,
oh, yeah.
Totally.
Like, there's house, I'll clean it all day. One thing that I just thought of, I did not know about estimated quarterly taxes my first year or two in business until I actually hired a professional. And he's like, yeah, you should be sending in estimated taxes. And so if you don't know about those, the IRS, if you're going to owe in money, they love to receive it ahead of time. And this is one of those things you need to ask your tax guy, not me, but because I have heard two separate thoughts. One is they really want you to send in 4 equal payments if you can. If you know what your tax liability is going to be, QuickBooks will tell me this is your profit for the quarter. This is what you should send in for your estimated taxes. But I actually have talked to a tax preparer before who said they just want you to send in something. They don't care what it is. They're not like double checking to see. And so, because like if you want to send in $200 every quarter, you send in $200 every quarter. That means I'm going to owe a lot more come April. And so I like to actually send in what my taxes are not very, my income is pretty consistent each year. My taxes are somewhat consistent each year. I kind of know a number. And so I just write a check every quarter and mail it in. Now I do it on the ePay, but that will save you from having to write a huge check in April, because I would, if I'm gonna have to give the money to the IRS anyway, take it so that I don't accidentally spend it on something, even if I have a separate account.
Yeah,
it's
still.
And so I think
Great advice.
estimated quarterly taxes are very important.
Yep.
Yeah. And like you said, it kind of shifts, because I used to do that, but then childcare, turns out that's a lot of money. It's like paying a college tuition. So we haven't, for the last few years, I haven't owed anything. We've gotten money back because we're spending literally a college tuition amount of money on childcare. So right now, my accountant has been like, don't send money in because you are going to get a refund back anyway. And you could be making interest on that money in your own account. You don't get interest when you send that money off to the IRS. So like, it just really kind of depends on what your life situation is. And so same thing. So I stopped sending my quarterly amount in because now we're getting refunds.
Yep.
It's an excellent example of how like your situation's not going to be the same as your best friend down the street. So
exactly. So here at the end, I want to go into, I'm thinking about what a brand new photographer is going to need. So we've talked about all of these like really tricky things, and there's some things that are fairly obvious things that, well, I mean, I think to me, there's stuff you think about like, okay, I bought my camera, like that's a business expense. So anything that is a business expense, you will be able to write something off with it. It's going to be dependent on however it's categorized. Things like office equipment, things like your memory cards. If you go to do a photography workshop, you're going to be able to write off the cost of that. In our Black Friday episode, Amanda talked about how she will wait to do a lot of her purchases on Black Friday because she has sales, and she's also going to be able to use what she buys, depending on what it is, as a tax write-off for the end of the year. So something like marketing material, if you want to purchase that marketing material, you'll be able to write it off at the end of the year. Now, one thing to think about is how much money you're actually making. Like, do you need a tax write-off? Is it, if you just started, you have like a couple $100 in the bank for your business. You don't want to write off too much stuff if you're not having a good profit. So you want to, maybe it's not going to be worthwhile to buy all your marketing material at once. Maybe that's something you're going to spread out. You're not going to be worrying about tax write-offs right then. And when it comes to equipment, and this is where it is going to be a little bit different, there's actually a couple ways that you can write off your equipment. And it's what's called a capital expense. So this is something that's going to last you more than a year. So your camera, Hopefully it lasts you more than a year. Your computer, any big purchases like that, you can write it off. Like, okay, I bought it. I'm writing it off at the end of the year. I've got this huge tax deduction. Again, if you're only making a few $100s this year, or maybe you only made like $5,000 this year, maybe you don't want to write off all of the equipment. You've spent, 10 grand getting everything set up. You maybe don't want to write all of that off, because once you hit zero, basically, you're not going to need any more of the tax write-off. So you can either do that, or you can do a depreciated write-off. The depreciation is going to do is it's going to let you take off a little bit of the equipment every year from your taxes. I'm not going to tell you percentages because I don't know. It's going to be different for everybody, how long the equipment lasts. And actually in TurboTax, it will, if you're doing like the pro or the professional version, it will actually let you know, hey, this might be something you can write off. It'll actually like give you ideas of things that you could possibly write off. So, hey, you're a photographer. This is what you can do and how you can write it off. So for big purchases like that, especially if you're starting out, I would recommend doing something like the depreciation rather than just writing it all off at once. It's really going to be helpful to do that throughout.
Another thing too I just thought of is when all of this, I'm trying to learn to use ChatGPT more. I should just go in there and ask ChatGPT, explain depreciation on my photography.
Oh, there you go. Have it teach you.
I'm an 8th grader, and maybe I'll finally understand it. But right now I just let Amy, my tax pro, like you take
some of this stuff I did. I was writing in ChatGPT, helping me like understand some of this stuff. A lot of, again, TurboTax, they have a lot of great articles. NerdWallet, I don't know if you ever use that. It's actually a really good financial advice website. They have some good articles, and it'll at least help you understand some of that stuff. So we've talked about a lot. We're going to put a lot of this practical, or places that you can find this practical information on our website, on our blog, in our newsletter that Erin has been sending out. So we're going to give you some more information. We're going to give you places to go look at. Check out QuickBooks, check out TurboTax. Here's some good articles. So we'll give you more information, and we hope you got something out of this, and hopefully it was a fun conversation.
I know, trying to take something that's not exciting and make it at least somewhat interesting.
It is. And so
trying to keep more money in people's pockets as they build their
absolutely what we want to do.
That's fun.
But we hope you had a great time, and we will talk to you next time we're on here. Bye.
Bye.
Catch you on the flip-flop.
Okay, Photo BFFs, if you have not subscribed, do that right now so you never miss a new episode. You can also find us at theeditweekly.com, where we have free resources and downloads for you to help grow your photo business.